If you can't have a policy, have a scare campaign. That's the coalition creed these days. Superannuation scares, stage 3 tax cut scares, China scares. Today, we're going to hear from Peter Dutton, speaking at the AFR Business Summit, that Albo's socialist Labor government is, quote, steering our nation to a dark, dark place. So we quote from a drop to the AFR this morning ahead of Dutton's speech to my old mate Phil Coorey in a stinging critique to be delivered at the Australian Financial Review Business Summit on Wednesday. Mr. Dutton will accuse the government of embracing a socialist agenda. This is the same government which gets donations from Woodside, Shell, Origin and Santos. Is this the same socialist government which still has stage 3 tax cuts on the table to benefit wealthier income Australians over the poorer? Is it the same socialist government whose emissions policy involves huge subsidies to big business? Do you see what's happening here? They are shifting the debate. They are skewing it to the right. The real political action is between the Greens and Labor in the upper house. The looming vote on Labor's emissions policy, its safeguard mechanism. This is the hot stuff. It should be about the soaring cost of living too, robo-debt and the government's grotesque disintegration of political integrity in the government, which resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Australians. But no, you're not seeing that emblazoned on the front pages. You're seeing superannuation tweaks which affect just 0.5% of the wealthiest Australians. We are seeing a fear campaign. The media is so hopeless in this country. They have been so conned by their coalition patrons and their own subsidies to shift the debate to the right. While Nine Entertainment's SMH and Age have been whipping up fears of an attack by China in 3 years, the ABC has been running Coalition and News Corp talking points on a brutal superannuation tax hit. Now let's look at the facts here. Let's follow the money. If you earn just $20,000 a year, have no assets, nowhere to live, and can hardly afford a jar of peanut butter, your marginal tax rate is 22.5%. If, however, you have $3 million or more in super, your tax rate is 15%. And that's only on your super, mind you. You might have $1 billion in other assets and a house on the water and a yacht and a holiday home in the Côte d'Azur. This is just superannuation we're talking, and not a new tax. It's about the removal of a tax concession. It is political fluff, beaten up into a gigantic fear campaign. Class warfare, they claim. With straight faces, mind you. Now, the reason Jim Chalmers has moved on super after 9 years of the most corrupt and incompetent government since the Robben Rebellion is that tax perks are out of control. Tax superannuation breaks, which mostly benefit wealthy Australians, are going to overtake the actual age pension for people that need it in coming years. This is subsidised by younger workers, and younger workers have got to get their head around this. They are subsidising unnecessary superannuation tax perks, which are being used, mind you, not just to fund people's retirement. These people have got lots of money, often. They're used as a tax shelter, which they pass on to their mollycoddled children. And yet, the media goes into bat for them, and the hysteria goes on day in, day out. It's been going on for more than a week now. Every day, saturation coverage, Page One, The Australian, the AFR, other corporate media, Koshi on 7, decrying Labor's raid on super. They are coming after the savings of Middle Australia. That was the line from Shadow Treasurer, of course, Angus Taylor on the ABC Insiders show on Sunday. There was Insiders platforming this nonsense. This, Angus Taylor, a bloke whose family and associated entities have helped themselves to $90 million or so in government grants and various subsidies over the years. Here was Angus, Cayman's Angus, answering questions that he wasn't asked, dissembling about the supposed attack on ordinary Australians and claiming incredibly that he himself was not in this cherished $3 million superannuation bracket. Most of the show was dedicated to this sideshow. This, after a week of News Corp and Nine, saturation coverage over Jim Chalmers' tiny superannuation changes. Tiny bit of robo-debt at the end, tiny bit of a couple of other issues. So you see what's happening here, the move to the right. As most Australians struggle, we have two major parties, both neoliberal parties, one incompetent and one much more competent, debating on the centre-right. This is the same media which kept Scott Morrison in power, still obsessing over coalition talking points, even though the only policy which we can recall espoused by the coalition, this is actual policy, not fear campaigns, is Peter Dutton's idea that elderly Australian retirees, presumably those ones which haven't got 3 million or more in super, that they go fruit picking and get tax relief for fruit picking income. What a policy. You can imagine in the 38-degree temperatures here on the East Coast over the past few days. 75-year-olds up a ladder fruit picking. Millennials wouldn't be doing it, that's for sure. The irony in all this is that these supposed free marketeers of the mainstream media are all subsidised by government. There's Nine's AFR, Murdoch's News Corp, ABC, and so it is that they ignore the gargantuan corporate welfare handouts to large corporations. They ignore the interests of ordinary Australians, the takeover of this country's defence, the eroding of our sovereignty by the US. Instead, they give us twaddle, marginal twaddle about class warfare and socialists relating to a tiny superannuation tax break. Let's get it straight, by the way. Inflation is not caused so much by workers or unions or anything like that. 70% of it is caused by companies lifting prices. It's companies. Unlike the corporate media with its government assistance and its fossil fuel advertisers, we are funded only by the community. So please help us build a new voice, an alternative voice to combat the rise of corporations and the influence of money in politics.